Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. And today, I want to talk about the lawsuit against social media, a lot of it, that needs to win. I think this is arguably one of the most important lawsuits we are going to see in this decade. And I think it's going to shape quite a bit. Now, as I've been reading this, I've obviously read multiple articles, but Elizabeth Nolan Brown of Reason, I think, had an excellent write up. And I agree with a lot of her analysis, although I do think there is some that I would definitely add to. Now, with that, I want to talk about this because a major moment for the tech industry, as I mentioned, is starting literally this week. And then basically, this is the first of a series of major quote unquote social media addiction trials that are now getting underway. Now, this particular case involves a 19-year-old California woman known simply as KGM, who claims that she was addicted to social media as a minor. Now, this habit, she asserts, caused low self esteem, body dysmorphia, depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. So let's dive in because I think this is an important one. KGM sued Meta, ByteDance, that they own TikTok, and Google, arguing that they had designed their products, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, to keep kids addicted to them and that they were negligent about the harms this could cause. And yeah, I do believe that is correct. You can read books by Gene Twenge, Jonathan Haidt, a whole bunch of others that have this longitudinal data and science behind it to say, yes, this is exactly what has happened. And for the record, Snapchat was originally named as a defendant as well, but they settled out of court with KGM. We do not know the terms of that agreement. So, on top of that, thousands of plaintiffs have brought over the years personal injury suits against Meta, Google, ByteDance, and Snap, alleging addiction and other mental health harms. Many of those suits were now consolidated into one coordinated judicial proceeding from which the judge selected three cases. These involve the pseudonyms, the plaintiffs known as KGM, as I've mentioned, RKC being the other one, and Moore, as in Thomas More, Moore, if you know Thomas More from history. Those three are going to trial. So, according to Courthouse News, and I quote, the judgments in those first three cases will, at least in theory, form the basis for a settlement covering the remaining plaintiffs, end quote. The jury selection, for the record, in KGM's case starts literally today as I'm recording this in California Superior Court in Los Angeles County. Clay Calvert, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, said, and I quote, the bellwether trial marks the first time in the United States that a case alleging social media addiction will reach a jury. That's how important this is. Because if you look at the longitudinal damage that the Facebooks, TikToks, etc. of the world have done, outside of just the disinformation and all of that kind of stuff, there is serious problems here. And so with that, let's get to the crux of the argument and why I actually think she's got a real good shot. Now, KGM is suing on negligence and negligent failure to warn grounds. If she is successful, it could unleash just a massive amount of lawsuits against tech platforms from people claiming that they and or their children spend way too much time on social media, and it's big tech's fault. In other words, it's Facebook's fault, it's Meta's fault, it's Google's fault, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, the case could also provide a playbook for plaintiffs to get around Section 230. And for the record, I've written actually in defense of Section 230 in many ways. That is the federal law that limits online entities' liability for third party speech in the First Amendment. That stemmed from a 1995 case called Zoran v. AOL, where basically Zoran sued AOL because somebody, like an individual not working for AOL, but was also using AOL, started doing really disparaging things against Zoran. And essentially, Section 230 was born out of that, meaning that because the AOLs at that time, now the Facebooks at that time, are not editors, they're not editing comments, nor do they have editorial oversight about what you or I post, they are absolved essentially from any kind of legal liability. This is the shield that the Facebooks of the world have been using since essentially their birth. Now, KGM argues that it's not the content on YouTube, TikTok, etc. that's addictive, it's actually their design features. And this, quite frankly, I think is where she's got a case and where I actually start to disagree with the author of this article that I'm paraphrasing from. Now, because we're talking about design features, and in this way, her complaint is then centered on the harm that the action, like basically, is on the harm on actions taken by the tech giants rather than third parties. In other words, It's not the third party content that is necessarily addicting her, it's how it's being delivered to her. This is far, for the record, from the first time this approach has been tried in court. And judges, again, for the record, have generally, not always, rejected this argument. In fact, the judge in this case, Caroline Kuehl, basically has already thrown out some of KGM's claims based on Section 230's grounds. These include claims against TikTok based on those challenge videos. I mean, we've all heard about them. If I'm not on TikTok, but we all have heard these stupid things, and those obviously involve users posting themselves engaging in risky activity, which then encourages obviously others to basically do the same thing. The Tide Pod challenge, for example, when these idiots were trying to eat Tide Pods. But Judge Kuehl wrote in November's 2025 motion, quote, there is evidence in the record that KGM was harmed by design features. The cause of KGM's harms is a disputed factual question that must be resolved by the jury, end quote. Now, Elizabeth Nolan Brown of Reason, again, who I've been cribbing from, also had a great analysis. And for the most part, I agree with a good chunk of this, but I do diverge. So with that, let's go into her logic, because the idea that this isn't about content falls apart pretty quickly upon examination, given some of KGM's statements. For instance, and I quote KGM, I have gotten a lot of content promoting like body checking posts of what I eat in a day, just a cucumber, making people feel bad if they don't eat like that, end quote. She said that in a video that was played for the court. Statements like that suggest, according to Brown, basically that it's the material itself, material protected by the First Amendment, that is basically contributing to KGM's problems, or at least allegedly contributing to them. So no matter what the algorithms that TikTok uses to generate people's feeds, whether Facebook employs endless scrolls, whether YouTube autoplays the next video, people would not be coming back to these platforms unless the content they featured, content provided by third parties, was compelling. And essentially, this content could not contribute to negative self image or other negative feelings based on design features alone. Again, this is the logic that Ms. Brown has, who wrote this article. Even the filters KGM complains about creating unrealistic expectations are simply a neutral photo editing tool, one of many that can provoke negative feelings only because of the way that users decide to employ it in creating their own content. You cannot divorce the design of these platforms from the content that they serve. And again, I think that's great analysis. That is Ms. Brown's analysis of Ms. Brown of Reason. But here's the thing. And this is why I think there's actually a shot here, and I really do hope there is, because these platforms are so long overdue. And if you think I haven't been talking about this, you can go back literally 6 months to my second version of basically a podcast slash segment called "It's Time to Put Mark Zuckerberg in Jail." That was my 2.0. I did the previous one back in like 2019 or 2018 or something, and I've been keeping a running tally. Those videos are like an hour long, but to me, here it is. The design, I think, is important. I think it's important. And that's what I think Elizabeth Nolan Brown is alluding to. But the design has to include algorithms, as she briefly mentioned. But those algorithms have been caught prioritizing third party content that skews towards the negative to extremely negative. And one could argue that has mental health effects in the long term. Now, think about it. Basically, you're on it every minute of every day. We know, studies show that especially the youth are spending hours and hours and hours on social media, which means they're spending days on social media, which means they're spending months on social media, which turns into years on social media. And now we're roughly 2 decades into the social media effort. And that's essentially basically pumping out worse and worse and more anger and more anger and all of this extreme driven content. This is not healthy. And when you're in that cycle, it is very difficult to break. So think about this. Facebook was caught prioritizing anger, especially on politics. The more angry it was, basically the wider audience that it would get, and you would get into this endless cycle. And if it basically confirmed your confirmation bias, like, think about the 2016 election. Oh yeah, like Hillary is the worst, or yeah, Trump is the worst, or whatever you believe. That's what we're talking about. And it's going to continue to do that. It's going to continue to get worse. And now we are 10 years into the politics of the day, starting back in 2016. We're now in 2026, where we have a second Trump presidency. Whether you love that or not is not my point. My point is that we have deeply divided emotions. And then you've got basically developing brains, teens that are trying to figure themselves out. And if you remember being a teenager, you remember that it was awkward. You didn't know really how to socialize. You were trying to figure these things out. And then you're putting out things that are demonstrably false. They're not watermarked for artificial intelligence. Kim Kardashian looks perfect because she's been photoshopped for 20 years. This is a problem. And so third party content not necessarily can be held liable by a Facebook, but Facebook is taking, and by Facebook, I mean all of them, is taking a lot of this and it's giving you more and more and more. And so that has to be something, there has to be a release valve. There's no, hey, are you enjoying this? Is this depressing you? Click here to, you know what, change the algorithm. And we've all seen it. You go watch one type of video all day long on YouTube, you're going to start getting those same kinds of videos. It's just what it is. So it's a huge problem that we have. And yes, I do think some third parties make it a heck of a lot worse. They need to be held individually liable, but these platforms are prioritizing the negative. They're prioritizing those things that have a deleterious effect on mental health. And when we are talking about the youth, kids can't see around corners like adults can. And even adults get addicted to this. This is a problem. And I hope the jury sees it this way. This is one of the most important trials that we're probably going to see, at least as it regards society, regards mental health. We are in the state that we are with the division that we have right now, thanks to the Facebooks of the world. And that's something that needs accountability. It's something that Mark Zuckerberg and all of the others have to be held accountable for. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at Nick AESP, where I actually hope you leave. Feel free to follow me wherever it is. I also have a nationally syndicated radio show. But if I, especially on Facebook, lost every single follower because every single follower decided to delete their account, I would delete my account there. It's really that simple. And until then, I'm going to keep the signal on through all of these social media platforms. So please follow me wherever it is, but understand, break that cycle. And if you're getting depressed on all of this social media stuff, change the algorithm in some way, shape, or form. Start looking up, I don't know, puppy videos or videos of the beach or something, that sparks a little joy, whatever it is. Marie Kondo the heck out of your mental health. And so with that, just stay informed, and stay healthy. And you know what? Stay tuned because I'm going to keep this one up. I think this is an important one and I'll report back. Take care.